Hey, welcome to Flight Test. I'm Josh, and today we're going to be showing you how to build the FT Bloody Baron. Now, the FT Bloody Baron is very special. This is actually our first community release and community series of a design created by Dan and Keegan Sponholz. They're a wonderful father and son group that love to fly together, play together, and what they did is they took the Bloody Wonder and made a best friend to it so they could fly and do combat together. Now, before you get started, you want to do a couple things. You're going to want to download your plans or buy the speedboat kit, as we always carry in our stores. You're also going to want to build your power pod. This plane can fly off both the B-Pack and the C-Pack. The B-Pack is excellent if you're an intermediate pilot or you have a small backyard. The C-Pack is fantastic if you want to do combat, streamer pulling, or really fast aerobatics. To build the power pod, there is a link down below that you can click on. It'll take you all the way through building the power pod, and also there's another link that'll take you to the setups to hook up your motor and your speed control, and also how to center up your servos. So let's get our materials in order and we'll get started. For this build, we're only going to need to use 3 of the 6 servos in the electronics pack, so you actually have enough to build 2 airframes with your servos. The first one's going to be the simplest. We're going to center all of our servos, and we're going to use the single-sided servo arm centered up, and we're not going to put any linkage stoppers in it. When it comes time for the elevator, we're actually going to use this and slide this much like many of our other designs and glue this down to center. The second servo we're going to use is going to be for our rudder. And for our rudder, once again, we're going to center it up. We're going to use our single side, and we're only going to go 3 holes out and insert our linkage stopper. Now, an important thing with your linkage stoppers is you don't want to screw this tight like a bolt. You want to actually let it flow free, not have any wiggle. Now, it's very important that you use Loctite to cinch this down. If you do not have Loctite, you can use a little drop of super glue, and if you don't have super glue, you can dab a little drop of clear nail polish just to lock this down, but you want to make sure this flows nice and free. And for the ailerons, we're going to cut the X servo horn down, and we're going to install our linkage stoppers on the furthest hole out. This includes a very long servo horn. You don't want to use that one. You want to use a shorter one so you don't have excessive throw. You only need about 12 to 20 degrees deflection to get amazing performance. Once again, we make sure that these turn nice and free. Now, the first thing we're going to get started with is our wing. Our wing is going to be the most involved and also very quick, though, to be built. Now, if you're obviously scratch building, you're going to be cutting this out, but in this case, we're going to simply punch it out. I actually like to rock it on both tabs like this. You can always trace it out with your razor blade. Believe it or not, this is all we need right now for the wing. Now, if you guys are wondering what this is, one of the suggestions we got is a lot of people getting in the hobby, they've gone from ARS or they're just getting into scratch building. They don't have the things they need, like a hot glue gun, a building mat, or razor blades, rulers, squares. So what we did is we put it all together in something called the Crafty Kit. This is actually the inside of the box of the Crafty Kit opened up just to give you a nice protective cover. I even misted this with a couple of mists of Camp Dry. It's like a silicone protectant just to make the glue release a little bit easier. You will be able to cut through it, but it gives you a little bit of protection between the plane and the table. So we're going to be building this whole entire kit with items from the Crafty Kit just so you can see what it is. It includes an Adtech Pro 200, which is our favorite glue gun of all time, and also our new mix of glue that works phenomenal with our foam board, plastic, and wood. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and crack the spar and fold it over. On your plans, you'll see this as a red score cut. On the kit, it's already scored for you. I'll take my glue gun and about a ½ inch or a couple centimeters from the edge, I'm going to lay down a small bead. Doesn't have to be too big. And I'm going to stop about a ½ inch from the edge. Lay this down on the table and fold it over. You're going to have about 25 seconds of working time with the hot glue. We have 2 different size razor blades, including the Crafty Kit. They're both used for different reasons. I'm going to use a small one for right now. We're going to go ahead and cut a double bevel. Now, the double bevel we're going to want to cut is going to be on the leading edge line right here. From here to here. So the way we're going to cut our double bevel is we're going to fold this over 180 degrees just like it came out of your kit. And I'm going to lay this right at the edge of the table right here. With my blade extended, I'm going to hold this not 90 degrees to the foam, but at a very sharp angle like you see here. And that way it's going to guide through. Now, being careful not to cut through the center, I'm going to guide the razor blade right down. Now, especially if you're using this crafty kit, you're going to be surprised how easy this cuts. This is Japanese steel blades, almost like a scalpel. So it's going to cut very, very easily and take a long time to dull. We're going to go ahead and do the same process on the other side. You can see I'm keeping my hand nice and far back. From the blade. When this is done, you're going to see a nice V-notch, just like you see here. That's going to allow this to fold over. Alright, now that we have our double bevel cut, our next step is to glue down our spar. Rather than applying glue and not being sure if we're lining it up, we're going to apply it once again about a ½ inch from the edge. Step right over the little tab. Carry it the whole way to the next tab. And then stop a ½ inch from the edge. Now we're going to seat these tabs down in to the bottom of the wing and hold and press firmly. Once again, about 25-30 seconds is what you want to hold, and we're ready for our next step. We used to always talk about taking a barbecue skewer and tracing down through these lines or opening up these gaps. With a lot of these builds now, I don't like to do that because I like to reinforce with the hot glue. You can still do that, but you got to put a lot more hot glue and it's a lot more weight. So before we go ahead and open any of this up, I want to go ahead and start and establish the folds where they need to be. And the easiest way to do that is by folding your wing over and giving it a test fold, just like you see here. You're not going to want to just force this over or push by the edges or push down sharp. Leave your hands nice and flat away and then push down. You can see the wing takes a very nice form, and it gives you time to make sure everything is nice and square. It's very difficult to do this. You may need to go back and cut these a little bit more shallow. You can also go back with a piece of sandpaper and sand these open a little bit more. Once we're happy with the way this folds over and holds, we're going to take the nozzle of our hot glue gun, make sure you have plenty of hot glue. We're going to set it right down in that gap, and we're going to press a bead right into it. We're going to do that 2 more times. This is going to give you a tremendous amount of strength and make your wing last a very long time. Now we're going to fold this over and hold it until it's dried. Make sure you don't put too much glue on here, or else when you push this down, you may glue it to your top spar. That comes later. After about 25 seconds, you'll be able to release, and you're going to notice that your wing now holds its shape on its own. That's exactly what you want. We can take our knife. Let's just make it easy on us and remove . There we are. Alright, we're happy with our fit. We feel good about this. We're going to go ahead and we're going to apply a bead of glue down our leading edge and also on the very top of the spar. We're going to hold off on the trailing edge and save that for the next step. Once again, always check the level of our glue. You're going to notice this glue is a little bit more white. This actually has a lot of binders in it, and it's a little bit more opaque, but it does dry clear, so you don't have to worry if you're working on colored foam or something like that. It dries perfectly clear, and it's an incredibly strong bond. About a ½ inch from the edge once again. Now we're going to fold this over, and with the flats of our hands, we're going to hold this down, focusing on both sides at once. Make sure you don't just lift up here and leave this up. It'll still probably fly good, but it'll look funny. You want to make sure all your energy is put right over these spars. Now in this case, I'm going to give this a little bit longer than 30 seconds because the thing I don't want to happen is I don't want to release this and let it slowly release itself and then dry hard. So give this a good minute. Now our next step is to fasten down the trailing edge. To do that, we're going to flip this over, and we're going to focus our glue right down in the seam through here. Now this is our hinge line, it's very close, so we're going to push our little nozzle just a little bit underneath the trailing edge of the wing. And then we're going to pump a nice bead, stopping about a ½ inch from each side. Now, we're going to go right back to where we were before, and we're going to fold this and press it down. The reason why we're putting it down where the top is facing up again instead of putting it on the bottom is I want to keep the bottom of the wing nice and flat. Now that we have our airfoil, we're going to put our attention towards the ailerons. To do this, We're going to crack these loose. This is a red line or a score cut on the speed build kit. We're going to fold this 180 degrees. We're going to take our knife once again. I'm just going to cross over. If you get more and more used to it, you can always go ahead and just hold it in your hand. Keep my fingers away from the blade, just above the crease of the paper. And we're going to cut a 45-degree bevel. Now it's very important when you do this that the aileron can go all the way up and down very easily. If you find hard to push down, what you have is too much meat between the paper here. You'll need to go back, and if you need to make a fine adjustment, making sure you have a nice sharp knife, and you can make the most finest of adjustments, just like that. You can also go back with sandpaper and sand this flat, but you always want to make sure you have as much deflection as possible with no binding. We're going to repeat the exact same process with the other aileron, and then we're going to reinforce it with hot glue. No binding. Now, if you're working on a kitchen table or working in a house where you don't want to make a mess and you have a speed build kit, just tape the bag to the side and throw all your scraps in there. Now I'm just going to take some of our extra scraps of foam, whether you're using the speed build kit or you're scratch building, you're going to have plenty of extra foam laying around. We're going to use this and reinforce the hinge line. Now it's very important, whether you're doing combat or you just want the plane to last a long time, that you don't rely on the paper alone for your hinge line. This will last a little longer, but after a couple hits, the paper could start delaminating. Now to fix this problem, I'm going to hold this up almost to where this is perfectly flat, but just leave a little bit of a V right here. I'm going to take the nozzle of my glue gun about a ½ inch from the one side, and I'm going to put a very, very thin ribbon of hot glue, pushing that nozzle down right onto that paper, like you see here. Now I'm going to follow up with a scrap piece of foam. I'm going to smear that glue all the way into that crease of the paper, going out towards both sides of the paper as you see here. I'm going to do that until I can't scrape anything more. Once I do this, I'm going to let this dry. I'm not going to close this off or close the seal. I want this to remain open until it's thoroughly dry. I'm going to repeat the same process on the next side. Once again, we're going to fold it over, not leaving an angle that's a curl. I'm not going to fold it over like this. I'm actually going to make it a little bit of a V, a little bit of a cup right here. Apply the glue right in the center. Then smear the hot glue down, going out towards the edge of the paper. Once it's thoroughly dry, it'll move nice and free. Now would be a great time to go ahead and finish off the servo and the push rod linkages while we're not messing around with the whole fuselage. Now this servo is already pre-centered, and if you guys have the crafty kit, we actually have a servo centerer that's included with that kit, so you can center up all your servos ahead of time. We're going to pass this through and give it a test fit. And because this has such a direct angle, I like to keep this as not like this where it's close by, but I like to turn this so it's far away. And it's going to have a little bit of a friction fit, as you see right here, and this cord is going to pass right through the bottom. Once we're happy with that fit, let's lift this up, apply a little glue on both sides, I'm going to press it down. You can always go back if you want and put a little bead on each side if you're going to be doing combat and you want to make sure everything stays together. You can always put a little bead down and spear it in. If after a bad combat you want to build another one of these, as our favorite mad scientist Peter likes to do, a couple drops of denatured alcohol, everything releases and you can pop it right out. Our next step is to install our push rods and our control horns. Before we glue our control horns down, I'm going to pass the push rod through the outermost hole away from where it's going to glue in. A couple little turns here. We have it. The closer you go, the more throw you have. On this design, you don't want too much throw because it becomes very, very touchy. We're going to pass this through. Now we actually give you 4 of these push rods, so save your extra material because you can always go back and scratch build one of these later. So press this down in and we can cut off the excess. Just a pair of pliers. Make sure that this is held down Our next step is to place a bead of glue down right where the control horn fastens into the aileron. And we'll seat this down in place. We're going to repeat the exact same process on the other side. We actually include 4 push rods that you can use to build this kit, and you're going to have extra, so you're going to have more than enough to make more kits. But if you're scratch building this, and say you have one of our push rod packs, or you just want to extend the material that you have, I'm going to show you how to bend a Z-bend very simply. We're going to go ahead and take a pair of pliers. I'm going to take a piece of rod. I'm going to bend it 90 degrees, as you see here. That's going to be our first bend. Now, allowing for the thickness of our push rod, we're only going to go about 1/16 of an inch, or about 3 or 4 millimeters. And we're going to pinch it, as you see right here. Once we have a grip with our pliers, we're going to bend 90 degrees. So you see this shape as you see here. Now this, as it stands alone, is a modified Z-bend. This is excellent if you actually want to scoop into a control horn like this. In this case, I want this control horn to look exactly the same. So I'm going to grab it one more time. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. Very, very smoothly, very slowly. And now we have a Z-bend just like all of our other push rods, but we made it ourselves. You can do this without needing linkage stoppers. The only difference is you got to be very accurate on how you bend it and the way you bend it to get the orientation right and to get this to line up properly so you don't have to trim it out with your servos. You should always work and try to get your servos perfectly centered with no sub trims so you have the most adjustment possible. We're going to go ahead and do the exact same process. We're going to take our control horn and we're going to fold this in to the top hole, rotate it 90 degrees, and pass it through our linkage stopper. We'll do a quick test fit to open up the cavity. And once we're happy, we'll follow up with a bead of glue. Now that we're happy again, I'm just going to hold this down so it's nice and level. And I'm going to cut this about 1/4 of an inch ahead. Now would be a really good time to go ahead and fasten it down. We're going to check all this again, but it wouldn't hurt, that way things aren't moving around on you. I'm just going to take a piece of scrap, or for that matter, I can use a little triangle. If you don't have one of these, it's included in the crafty kit. I'm going to hold this down. I'm going to tighten it just as you see right here. Once it's friction fit, you can hold it and do the same process on the other side. Your wing is now done. We're going to move on to the tail. Now that the wings are done, we're going to put our attention towards the tail. Now for the tail, we're going to remove 2 pieces. It's going to be the horizontal tail. Obviously, if you're scratch building this, you're going to cut this out. Now, a little tip if you're scratch building these kind of planes with these scallops on the trailing edge and with a lot of tight curves, one thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to go from one edge and then stop and then start in one edge. What would be better to do is actually start before, cut through, and end after. Start before, cut through, and after. Doing this will give you a lot smoother cut. And also for things that are sharp like this, you don't want to go ahead and round it off and try to go through this way. Your blades, even on the narrow blades, are too wide. It's much better if you do an angle, and then do another angle. You'll get a lot better results doing it that way. We're going to put our attention now to the fin and the rudder. The fin gives you vertical tracking, and the rudder steers you in your yaw direction. We're going to fold this over 180 degrees, and we're going to cut a single bevel just like we did on our ailerons. Shallow cut, close to the paper, and then we're going to check it for deflection. This one's a little bit bound up. I'm going to go over it one more time. Get it right up against the paper. You don't need much more than 12 degrees, but you don't want your servo to struggle. We're going to repeat the exact same process on your elevator, and then we're going to go back and reinforce it with hot glue. Crack at 180 degrees, Now this we can't start on one edge, so we're going to start in just a little bit. We're going to cut down to our 45-degree bevel. And then I'm going to pull this down, just finish it off, just like you see there. I'm going to do that one more time here, just get it a little bit cleaned up. Don't need to get it in one swipe. Now this would cause binding. So I'm going to go ahead and hold this here and finish the cut off this direction. Now a very simple way to do this would just be to take a sanding block and sand it. You can also go ahead and remove the extra little piece of paper from both sides here. Before we reinforce our bevels, I'm just going to go ahead and cut this out right here, because that'll be our next step afterwards. Now, just like we did with our ailerons, we'll hold this open in a slight V, put the nozzle of our glue gun down, and we're still working on our very first stick of hot glue. Go this way a little bit. Again, we're going to keep on passing it back and forth so all the hot glue is either wiped off or worked into the paper and the foam. We're going to repeat the exact same process on the rudder. Now just before I talked about this was the fin and this was the rudder. This here is a horizontal stabilizer and this is the elevator. The horizontal stabilizer gives you tracking and keeps you stable as you're moving through in pitch, and the elevator is going to give you pitch authority or pitch control to move the airplane up and down. Alright, now that our glue hinges are reinforced, we're going to do a test fit really quick. Now we're going to make sure that the hinge line of the elevator and the stabilizer are facing down and that the rudder pushes on top. Reason being is we want the control horn line to be on the right side. We're happy with that fit. We're going to go back and we're going to focus our glue on here so we don't have to guess where this is. Front nose is going to hang over just a touch. The next piece going in will fix that. We'll press this down. Now because these tabs extend through the bottom, it's very difficult to make sure and check for vertical. So go ahead and take a triangle, whether it's out of cardboard or whether it's plastic, and hold it until it's thoroughly dry. Once this is nice and dry, we're going to go back one more time with a bead on each side to reinforce it. Now if you're doing a lot of combat, you can even take some barbecue skewers down and glue them in, punch them through and glue them in, just to give a little bit more strength. Just going to take a scrap piece of foam. This is the same scrap piece of foam I've been working with the whole entire time. We're going to smear it nice and smooth. And we'll follow right up again, make sure it's still square. At this point we can put the tail aside and we can work on our fuselage. Now Dan Sponholz and his wonderful son Keegan did an amazing job with designing this fuselage, and as a matter of fact I want to make the Bloody Wonder a version 3 and use this fuselage on it because it's such a wonderful easy build fuselage and it's very, very strong. The first thing we're going to do though is we're going to punch out these 3 pieces. If you're kit building, go ahead and cut them out, and we're going to go ahead and trace along these lines because this is where we're going to actually do a B-fold. What I like to do is before we move in the foam, I like to just trace it to get as close to the paper as possible without cutting through. Now be careful, if you push too hard you're going to cut through your paper. If you do that, don't worry. Just go ahead and flip it over, reinforce it with a piece of tape, and that becomes your new surface that you fold it on. One more time, the front. It only takes a moment to do, but it makes the paper come out very nicely. On many of the speed build kits you can fold it over and crack it right out first time. Just helps to do it. Once we have this, we're going to fold it 180 degrees. We're going to use our fingernail. We're just going to rotate the piece of foam right out. If it comes out in a nice solid piece, you know you did a good job. Repeat the same process on the other side. Now all of our speed build kits use this folding technique. We have either A folds or B folds. If you built your power pod already, you've already experienced the A-fold, and A is where the side is above the bottom plate. B is where the side is besides the bottom plate. A wonderful gentleman from our community taught us that. Roll it out. And roll it out again. Now, we have our cavities as you see here. Let's go ahead and remove this one here. Same process. Light score cut. Go to 180 degrees here. Then crack out the extra. Just peel it off. This is where your barbecue skewers are going to go through. We're going to put these aside and give ourselves a little bit of room. Now to perform a B-fold, we want to make sure that the side cheeks are besides the bottom plate. So what it should look like if you're looking from the front, it should look like this. We want to make sure that this fold is the exact same way and pushed up against the table the whole way back to the tail. So to do that, we're going to actually start our fold, and then we're going to hold it for a while, and then we're going to flip it around with these tabs extending over the side of the table. But before we do that, let's go ahead and get this guy out of our way. We're going to call this affectionately a C-fold, and if you see this little diagram here, it shows us exactly what it should look like. It should simply fold over just like that. That's going to give us the right amount of down thrust that we need. So let's apply a little glue here. I'll even apply a little bit of glue right here. Keep that scrap piece of foam handy, we're going to use it in just a second. I'm going to rub this back and forth, smear it a little bit. This is one of the folds you don't use the table as your friend. And with that extra glue, take this piece of foam here, because heat passes through the paper very easily, and get a nice hard edge. So now we're ready to do our B-fold. We're going to focus most of our glue on either the side of the paper here, or what I prefer to do is put on the side of the foam. You do not want to put it on the paper of the fold, because what will happen is you'll be pushing the side cheeks against the glue. We want to adhere the side to the bottom plate. Before I start, I'm seeing I'm almost out of a glue stick. I'm going to go ahead and put a little drop of glue. Peter Schriepel taught us this. Works really well. And then I'm going to glue one glue stick to the other glue stick. Always check to make sure you have enough glue before you do every step. Now I'm going to go ahead and apply some glue to the side of the bottom plate. And I always like to stop my glue about a ½ inch or so from the very edge. That way when it squishes, it doesn't pour out the edge. Let's start here. Pressing down against the table. I always say my table is my friend. Once I have that side done, I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees. I'm going to put my attention towards the other side. Doesn't hurt to always have a triangle, whether it be a foam, whether it be a piece of tape, something to hold against the sides. What I like to do is when each side is drying, give it a few seconds and go back to the other side just to make sure nothing's changed on you. Pushing down against the table. If you try to do this while you're holding it up in the air, what will happen is you'll get a very round edge. And when you go to glue your horizontal stabilizer on it and your wing, it's going to be rounded on the corner. You want a nice, smooth, solid edge, just like this. So our next step is to repeat the exact same process. We're going to apply a bead of glue on the side of the bottom plate. Don't worry if your hand jiggles off, it's fine. And a little bit on the top here, give it that extra strength. Going back to the table, pressing down firmly against the table, letting the side cheek push firmly against the bottom and against the bottom plate. I'm going to fold it over again, do the same process again, push firmly against the table. And then I'm going to follow up with my triangle again. Make sure we're square. Got about a good 30 seconds of working time with hot glue. So now it's time to give a little bit more strength, and this is where Dan and Keegan did a great job. They actually designed doublers into their fuselage. And for combat and for just rough flying where you want this to last a long time, it is fantastic. And we're just going to test fit this really quick before we glue it in. If you do everything right, this hole here should line up perfectly. All right, we're happy with that fit. We're gonna make sure we have plenty of hot glue. And I'm just gonna follow the perimeter and then go one stripe down the middle. About a 1/4 inch all the way around the perimeter. So another stripe down the middle. And on the bottom edge, being careful not to glue my fingers. Not much rocking I can do here, but I'm gonna rock it the best I can just to get the best fit. Once we're happy with that, I'm gonna lay this file on the building board and I'm gonna press it firmly against the side cheek. We're gonna repeat the exact same process on the other side. First, we're gonna do a test fit. Nice. If any of you have glued this and you have a little bit of glue puddling over and it doesn't fit nicely, rather than trying to dig up your fuselage, just round this back part a little bit so it settles down nice and even. All right. We're gonna apply our glue. Make sure we apply it to the right side. One of the really neat things that come from families and friends that design together is they design around their experiences that they want to have or what they've experienced together. So they're either problem solving or creating together. And one thing I'm really excited about the community series is the stories that come out of it, but also the solutions. All right, we're setting this down and we're putting this against the table. Once again, pressing down nice and firm. All the way along the surface. Doesn't hurt to go back and check and make sure that you're square. Now this next step is a little bit messy. It's not something you have to do, but I would strongly recommend it, especially if you want this plane to last a little longer. One thing with combat planes is generally you take them out, you build them, you fly them, you wreck them. This will give you a lot more durability just by reinforcing this bottom with a little bit of glue and seaming these two edges together. And the way we're going to do that with some scrap foam and plenty of hot glue. Now we used hot glue for reinforcing our hinge lines. We're going to do much the same process, except we're going to go ahead and put a nice puddle of glue and we're going to work it in from edge to edge and over the center seam here. I'm going to go ahead and do the back half first just to show you, and if you guys are uncomfortable doing this, this part is a lot easier than doing around. You can do this in smaller sections if you need to. Just take your time and let it dry thoroughly before you do the next section. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a little bit healthier bead of glue here because it has to spread a lot more. I'm going to put a thin one on this side too. I'm going to take my scrap piece of foam and beware that this can puddle up and drop on you. As you see, when I push straight down on this, it pulls over on the side. Now I'm going to follow up. You're going to have a little bit of reflection on this. But what I like to do is after I pull this over, I actually like to curl the sides in just a little bit. And the most important thing is once you're happy with it, don't touch it. Because it's a little bit more glue than normal, give it a good 2 minutes to dry. Now those that are really experienced with this, they can do the whole side in one time and work it. If you're worried, just do one half at a time. But what you'll see here is that this area is really reinforced, it's nice and rubbery, and it's sealed from edge to edge right around here. So when you belly land it, when you hit things, it's going to be very strong. I'm going to go ahead and do the front half now. And don't be afraid to cut off extra pieces of your foam to have a nice new edge. Alright, following the same procedure, just a decent bead on both sides. Keep in mind as you pull this forward, it's going to get thicker and thicker and thicker as you build up. Alright, here we are, smearing away. Getting that inner edge. You can see all that glue that's kind of falling down in there. I'm going to smear that up. I'm going to fold this over. Working now down here and over here. Now this doesn't have to be only for combat planes. A lot of people are doing this on their Warbirds and their more involved planes with the Krakens before they paint it. And you can do this with the whole entire airframe. You can reinforce these edges. You can see it makes a nice rubbery solid edge that's not going to fray or delaminate in the future. Also won't paper cut you either. Now, I'm going to go ahead and do the other half, but let's go ahead and show you how to do it on a single surface like the elevator. This elevator is going to get a tremendous amount of punishment and quite possibly delaminate, especially around these areas here. So, I'm going to take some of this little pull-outs that we had from our fuselage, and I'm going to put a thin bead. And when I say thin, I mean thin, because this time we're not wrapping around both sides, on both sides. Now I'm going to lay that foam down in this groove. I'm actually going to trace it right along here, just like a paintbrush, just like you're spreading paint in between the foam halves, just like that. And I'm not going to do the whole entire side. I'm going to work this until once it starts balling up on your spreader, then you know it's time to let it dry, much like Bondo on a car. You can see once I do that, got a beautiful, nice, secure edge that's not going to fray on you. So you can actually take your time, repeat this process on the whole entire airplane if you want, or practice on some scrap cut-off pieces. If you're doing speedboat kits, practice on a laser cut piece like you'd see here that has the concave from the laser beam going through it. And if you're scratch building, cut a little groove in it. So you put your bead down, and then you can put this notch on it, and then you can drag it over. And then that will give you a nice coat right on the very end. Now before we go ahead and start putting tails on and flipping things over, let's go ahead and mount our power pod. Now if you haven't built a power pod yet, I strongly recommend you do so. You don't need to have your motor on. If you're waiting for that to come in the mail, that's fine. Just make sure you have it built, because we're going to go ahead and mount that now and make it removable. And it's very important that we line things up properly. To do so, we're going to grab our power pod and a barbecue skewer. We're going to make sure that our electronics aren't popping out. And we're going to go ahead and push this up so our notches meet, just like that. Now you're going to notice that these aren't as deep as this. That's because of that C-fold we did up here to give it the proper thrust angle. So while we have this in here, let's go ahead and pass this through, and if you did everything right, it should be able to pass through nice and clean. But don't go ahead and just jam it through. You can always go through each side, like this. And then you can even look through the belly. Make sure you're happy with the fit. Now if you want to go really crazy, you could take a credit card and put a credit card between the power pod and the fuselage and then drill a hole through, or we have reinforcement discs on our store. But I'm going to go ahead and take this about a 1/4 inch out, and I'm going to roll this with my blade. Notice I'm leaving that sharp edge intact. I'm just going to crack it, have a nice clean edge. Let's pass this on through. A real handy way of keeping this on is taking 2 little pieces of fuel tubing or 2 little grommets that you get out of the hobby shop. Maybe even find them on your servos and push them on each side. Another thing you can do is put a little glob of glue on one side, and I'll show you that later. Alright, now as you can see that both these holes line up perfectly. And if you have a laser cut kit, this has already been cut for you. We're going to go ahead and insert this. And with the twisting motion, we're going to take it in about 1 inch. And we're going to do the exact same process on the other side. Once we're happy with that, we can remove the whole power pod. And we're going to cut 2 1.5-inch lengths of this barbecue skewer that we have left over. Then we're going to go down, we're going to roll it back and forth. And one more time. Now that we have that, we can put our attention towards the 2 holes that we just made. I'm just going to put a very small drop of glue right inside this hole, nothing too big. And pretending this is a drill bit, I'm going to pass this through with a twisting motion and just leave about a 1/2 inch or a little over a centimeter on the barbecue skewer left exposed. Same process on the other side. Little twisting motion does its key. Push it down. And there we are. So now we can go ahead and we're going to open up. This is our little NACA duct here. And what we want for our NACA duct is we want this to hold its shape down here, so as airflow goes over, it comes down and cools your ESC. It's very important, especially if you're going to be flying very hard. To do this, I'm going to go ahead and put a little drop right at this little red score cut, a little red line on your plans, or a little etch. I put a little drop of glue right there. I'm just going to take my finger and hold it in. Give it about 30 seconds and then we'll hold that shape for you. So let's go ahead and put our attention now towards the tail and the fuselage, putting them together. Let's go ahead and do a dry fit, and before we do, I'm just going to pinch these guys together just a little bit, just to make them work to slide right in the slot. I'm going to go ahead and do a test fit. If something doesn't get together nicely, rather than forcing it, go ahead and find out why. In this case, it's nice and tight against all the edges. That's just what we want. Now before I glue it, if you check for square on everything, you're most likely going to stay square on everything. So we're going to go ahead and grab our triangle. We're going to hold it there, and that looks fantastic. So you can see we have a spot here and here that we don't want to go past with glue. So I'm just going to take my fingernail, just put a little reference mark right here, so we know where our glue area is going to be. And once we have that, put our glue down. Go back to what we did before. Sheet it together. Maybe a little wiggle back and forth. The nice thing about these tabs is you're not going to get your rudder offset slightly. So if you're cutting this out by scratch, make sure that you have this nice and centered and that you follow the plans as closely as possible. If something doesn't look right, if it looks like this is tilted, go back and check your drawing or check where you cut. While this is drying, I'm going to go ahead and go back and check for square again. That looks great. Now would be a good time to also put a reinforcement bead of glue on both the edges. And follow up with a scrap piece of paper. Smear them. Same process on this side as well. There you go. You can see the importance now of having the hinge line facing down. This lines up beautifully with where our servo is going to be. Now before we put our servos in, we're going to go ahead and put one more piece on. It's going to be found on your fuselage panel of your speedboat kit, or on your plans. It's going to look like this component right here. This is a little doubler that we're going to put down to give a little bit more strength and a little bit more beauty. Dan and his son did a great job when they designed this to make sure that there's strength and form all in one package. They did a great job. They captured everything that we'd hope a swappable would be and more. It's truly humbling to see what you guys are creating out there. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and put some glue down. I'm going to slide this in. I'm going to keep that front edge up just a little bit because I don't want to make a mess here. I want the wing to sit down there. And we're going to slide that in nice and flush, right on both sides. And if you see here, these rectangles line up with each other. Now would be a really good time before we put the wings on to go ahead and do our servos. So we're going to go into our accessory kit. We're going to pull out 2 more push rods, and we're going to also pull out a couple other items too. Now the first servo we're going to work on is going to be our elevator. Now it's very important with the elevator, this is going to fit down in with this orientation here. If you have this so the arm's going forward, it's going to run into the fuselage. So make sure if you're facing the elevator here, the arm is going to your right. Also, you want the servo with no linkage stopper. This is the one that we said do not install the linkage stopper on. And we'll show you why in a second. We have our push rod and our control horn. Our next step is going to be to slide this, and I like to go to the furthest hole out once again. You don't need an excessive amount of control. And also, if you're flying on a simpler radio like a DX5E or Gropner's new MZ10 that has wireless training, it would be a good idea to set these throws up because they're already pre-configured for dual rates, so that way your high and low will be just right for you. So we're going to go ahead and sit this down in here. You can always make it crazy and dial the throws way down, but then you're going to lose resolution. Let's just give this a test wiggle here. Nice. Now, we got a couple things we want to do before we go ahead and put a Z-bend in here, and that's why I wanted to show you nice folks what a Z-bend was. We're going to cut about a 1-inch length of the coffee stir that's included in your kit, just like this. This is going to be what gives us strength. One thing I always talk about is it's always good to pull to positive, not push to positive. And in this case, because of the way it's designed and that sleek look, it's push to positive. So we want to make sure that this wire doesn't bend at all. So we're going to slide this in so we can then fasten this. And so the wire has a nice brace right here. Just like you see that. Now let's go ahead and lay this servo in. And you don't really have to be exact. This little square is just a reference of where it'd be a good idea to put your servo. It doesn't have to be exact, but what we want to do is we want to go ahead and find a mark very close to that servo arm. We're going to hold it here. And with our pliers, bending the direction that's going to pass through the servo arm, as you see here, we're going to bend this 90 degrees. Just like that. We're now going to follow it up with one more bend, and we're going to leave this as a modified Z-bend. If you have to, you can always just go a little bit more. We're going to leave this as a modified Z-bend, so we're only going to go down the width of the servo arm, and we're going to bend it straight up towards us like so. Now we're not going to bend it into a Z-bend, we're going to leave it like that. I'm going to cut it about 1/4 inch up. Let me find something that I can show you as a backdrop. Actually, we can show you here. I haven't glued this in yet. Once we're happy with that, I'm going to go ahead and take this control horn and I'm going to go to the middle hole. So we're going to find the middle hole right here. Should pass right through. If any of you out there are scratch building and you can't find things like push rod wire, I know it's very difficult in some areas to find it. We do have little packs, 20 control horns, wire, things like that. We want you to fall in love with scratch building, and those little things that are hard to find, we want to give it to you. You don't always have to buy a speedboat kit from us. We want you to have a good experience creating something. So we're going to have this sit down here, but we don't want to glue anything. If you have a sticker on your servo right here, make sure you remove it, and then make sure you come back and you scratch up this plastic. You can use a piece of 100 grit sandpaper or a couple little carves with a razor blade. Will give you a tremendous amount of grip in this area. If your plastic is dirty or waxy or used, wipe it off with a little denatured alcohol and dry that out. Alright, so we're going to put our attention now. We have all of our assembly here. We're going to put our attention first on the control horn. That is the most important. We've already established our little hole. A little bead of glue there. Press down. Smear off the excess and let it dry. Alright, so our control horn is nice and glued down and secure. We're going to go ahead and pass our push rod that we made through. We're going to go to the very furthest hole from the hinge line. That's going to give us the right amount of throw. And our next step that we're going to want to do before we glue this down, because this is ultimately going to be what adjusts our surface, so we're going to go right in the middle of this control horn and we're going to go ahead and fasten this down. So I'm going to leave this to the side. Put just a little drop of glue. Don't put something so big that when you push it down it's going to burn your fingers. Just hold it there. Give yourself a good 30 seconds at least. Some people even like to take a little piece of Scotch tape and put it over this too. Alright, now as you can see, I just went ahead and eyeballed this, and it's not a big deal. This is just a referenced area saying, hey, it'd be a good idea to put it somewhere around here. But what you do want to do is you want to make sure you don't put it against this wall where it'll interfere with the power pod. Our next job, now that this is nice and secure, is put a little drop of glue on the back of the servo here. It's really important with the glue, or more glue doesn't mean more strength. It's the way it's spread. So we're going to flip this over, we're going to smear it around a little bit, and this servo is already centered up, so I'm going to go ahead and move this until this is nice and centered. Just like that. Hold it down with a nice firm pinch. If you have a layer of hot glue this thick between your servo and your fuselage, it's going to break loose eventually. The best thing to do is, if you don't like the joint, rock it until it comes loose, peel it off, and start all over again. This is your up and down. This is what's going to control your plane. The one function I would not want to lose would be my elevator. Second would be my ailerons. Third would be my rudder. This is nice and secure. This is not going to bend now, so even when I'm flying very fast, I'm not going to have any flex in this push rod at all. Let's go ahead and do the same thing, but let's work on the rudder on the top. Alright, so we still have 2 more push rods. We gave you 1 push rod per control surface. You don't need to use these if you don't want to. You can actually, now that you know how to bend Z-bends, you can bend it with this here. And you only need to bend 1. So going back again, we're going to bend once, 90 degrees. The thickness of our control horn or our servo arm, bend again, and then rotate 90 degrees. You can always also use the extra wire you have to practice these bends and practice making your push rods. This has a linkage stopper, so our job's pretty easy. All we need to do is glue our control horn in, notch this, and then we're going to put a little bit of a brace to allow us to keep the flex down, and then we're going to glue our servo in. Alright, so here's our little control horn. You guys are familiar with this. We're just going to make that cavity again. Always good to test fit anything that you want to glue every time. Check for deflection, check for binding, make sure it's on the right side. In this case, we're going to be going down the left side of the rudder. We're happy with that. Let's go ahead and glue it. A little bit of glue. The holes always line up with the hinge line. The holes never go away from the hinge line. So to this day, once in a while, I get in a hurry and I glue my control horn backwards. If your control horn holes are on this side, you need to cut it out and flip it around. And to get even deflection, or the closest to even deflection, your hole should always line up with your flat on your hinge line, not with the back part of the bevel. Okay. Just like we did before, we're going to cut. In this case, it's going to be about 3/4 of an inch or 2 centimeters. We're going to pass this on through, and we're going to once again go to the furthest hole on the outside. And now we can put our attention to our linkage stoppers and our servo. Alright, that feels good. We back this out so the rod can pass through. I want this so the cord is facing forward. We're going to go ahead and we're going to route our servo lead down through. And just like with the elevator, we want our servo lead to be facing forward, and we want our control horn on the right side. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to try to line up the little hole on the linkage stopper and pass it on through. Once we're happy with that fit, we can just push this up a little bit. Put a little drop under each side. And press it on down. Give it about 15 seconds or so, and then you can go right back and just kind of fold that hot glue over and let it dry the rest of the way right over the servo. Now before we put the linkage stopper down, we're going to do the same thing we did on our elevator. We're going to put a little drop of glue where this is going to contact, not close to the edges, but right in the middle, and we're going to push it down in. There's a little drop of glue, doesn't have to be anything too big. Give it about 10 seconds or so you don't burn your finger when you push this down in. Set it down in there, let it dry. And because the plastic dries at a different speed, it heats up the plastic. Give it a little bit more time than you normally would than when you're putting foam together. Maybe about 40 seconds. There you go. Alright. I'm just going to take the triangle here. Actually, what I can do is take our steel ruler. Just like this. Steel rulers are nice because you can't cut them up. We're going to hold this on one side. I'm going to lock down that linkage stopper. That's max. This is one of the benefits when you use a servo center and you use linkage stoppers. The final setups, which is the most annoying, which is servos and linkages like that, are very easy and very quick. So everything's all set here. This is a little bit on the long side, I don't like it. I'm going to go ahead and cut that down. Rather than ejecting it through the room, just put a piece of foam on the other side. Now we can capture it. If you're working in a classroom setting or anything like this, move away or hover this over a garbage can, or put a pair of safety glasses on. So we're ready for our wing. Now we have 2 tabs. That's what we were trying to protect on our fuselage. They tab right into our wing here. So I'm just going to go ahead and relieve these here and here. and shake those out on the bottom side. Some of you have probably already cut those out. Alright, so let's go into a test fit, but we got to route this wire down through. And we're going to line up these tabs just like that. Nice and firm. And then a very important thing is to sight down the fuselage and make sure that it's parallel with your stabilizer. It can be off a little bit, it just looks a little bit funny, but if it's off too much, you're going to get some odd flight effects. But I'm really happy with that. Alright, we're going to leave our little extension going through. Just going to flip this over here. Try not to get any hot glue on this. We got plenty. We're only halfway through our second hot glue stick. This glue is very hard and it goes a long way. Keep in mind we don't want to put glue too far forward, so we're going to keep it right around where these notches are and go all the way back. There we are. I'm going to drop this through. Line up these tabs. Sorry about moving things around on you so much. Now make sure both sides of the tabs are firmly seated. And the most important thing is going back to make sure it's nice and parallel to the tail. That looks really good. Can't say enough about the amazing people in our community. Dan Sponholz and Keegan, you guys did such a great job. Everything just fits. And we're going slow and we're walking through this methodically, but if you built a couple of these, or especially if you build them as a group, you'd be amazed how quickly you can pop out 15 to 20 of these in just a couple hours. It really makes the whole combat experience fun because they're so much fun to build and so much fun to fly. I'm going to go ahead and go back again. Nice heavy beat on both sides because this is a combat wing. We want to keep our wing on. Smear this nice and smooth. Now in the past I would smear with my fingers. My fingers are kind of calloused, so I don't feel heat very well, and I cause a lot of people to get blisters, so I'm trying to use scrap foam more often. If you're going to smear with your finger, you either have a little cup of water or lick the tip of it and then smear it. That'll keep it from burning as quickly. But I don't want you guys getting blisters, and at the last couple Flite Fests I saw a lot of kids walking around with blisters on their fingers. So I'm trying to use scrap foam more often. But that looks fantastic. Let's go ahead and put the power pod and connect our radio. So now it's time to go ahead and connect our radio gear together and connect all our servos to the receiver. One thing I want to do is I've been walking around with a prop on this. We want to remove this prop. Reason being is if God forbid we plug this into the wrong channel, it can rev up on us. So if you're in a school or even if you're home alone, make sure you remove the prop. You can leave the nuts off. And speaking of props, we want speed out of this one that we're going to be test flying. So I got the 9.6 prop on it. The CPAC comes with 10.47. You'll get tons of power, lots of static thrust, but you'll get a lot more speed if you go to the 9.6. It's only a few bucks. All right. So this has the same lineup as Spectrum. I'm going to go ahead and hook it up to the MZ12. The reason I've been using the MZ12 a lot, it has wireless buddy boxing. And a lot of our trainers, a lot of our planes, when you're training someone, having a cord connecting you is a big deal. So I love the features of wireless buddy boxing and also the cost on the receivers. So channel 1 is going to be for the throttle. If any of you are familiar with Spectrum, it's just the same lineup as that. So we have this connected. Now the battery on this is going to be on the bottom. You can actually make this so you pull a skewer and you can sit your battery right in here, but I want to make it easy to change things over, and I'm going to be flying this hard. So my battery is going to fit up in the nose. We're going to use the battery to adjust our CG. I want to actually make this little connector pass through the bottom right here. So let's go ahead and cut that out. We leave this solid because some people like to keep it internal, some people keep it external, but most of our designs pop out the bottom. And the reason I like to actually stretch this out a little bit is because it allows the ESC to wander back a little bit farther than normal. And that'll get it more airflow. More airflow will give it more cooling. Just like that. Alright, let's go ahead and power this up, make sure that we have everything working properly. Now you can hear that beeping. This is a wireless telemetry link. It's telling me that it doesn't have any receiver signal. There's my receiver signal. Now it's very important when you have this that you make sure the prop is, number one, spinning the right way, and also these wires aren't running against this rear shaft. This prop is spinning the perfect direction, just like this. If it was running backwards, we would switch two of these connectors. Now if you watch the power pod video and the setup video, you'd know this already, but I want to show it to you because it's very important, especially when you're flying planes with lots of power. Let's go ahead and go through an ESC calibration. We're going to move the stick all the way to the top. We're going to plug this in. We're going to wait for 2 beeps. Move it all the way to the bottom. Now what this did is this just taught the ESC, which is your electronic speed control, what the full throttle range is. If you ever get to where you're going about 1/3 of the way up and then your motor starts, you know your ESC has been calibrated. Also, if you're trying to start your motor and it's kind of jittering around and not really making much sense with power, it doesn't seem like it has enough power, do an ESC calibration. It can do everything from not letting your motor restart in flight, to giving you limited power, to giving you odd throttle bands. So go ahead and do that first with every build, but this feels good. Now I'm going to go ahead and dress this up later with a piece of tape. So the next step I'm going to do is put a piece of Velcro on the bottom. It's always easier to do this before you put it on the plane and bang the plane flipping it all around. Here we are. Now, we'll lightly put the plane on its backside. We're going to go ahead and unplug this for the moment. Let's connect our aileron next. Our aileron is going to go into channel port number 2, and if you look at this, this is lining up just how the servo would go in this way. So negative would be brown or black. There's our brown. Middle is positive. There's our red. And the signal wire is going to be orange or white. Let's go and plug this in here. Second channel we're going to want to look for is going to be our elevator. It's going to be right here. Follow the same orientation. Whenever you're plugging your receiver in, you're always going to want all your grounds on the same side. So once you figured it out and your throttle works, match all the rest of them up. The last one's going to be our rudder, which is channel port number 4. You still have 5 and 6 for more options. You could do a bomb drop, you could do a streamer release, you could do camera operation for FPV. You can do anything you want with these additional channels. You can program on any switch too. Alright, we have this. I'm going to take a little drop of glue. Keep in mind if your ESC gets too hot, that drop of glue is not going to hold very long. If we have a 30 amp ESC in here, it's not going to get so much as a bit warm. Just going to drop it right in here. Then I'm also going to drop the receiver right against the sidewall here. I'm going to leave my little bind port out. One nice thing I like about these receivers as well is you don't need a bind plug. You have a little button that you push, and you hold that button down, and when the light goes out, you push bind on the transmitter and it binds instantly. It's very user friendly. There's no binding to the telemetry. It's automatically built into the receiver, so you don't have to mess with this. There we are. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and put our power pod back on. We're going to put our attention towards the back here, make sure we're not pinching any wires. And if you guys are new to the swappable concept, the whole idea is that this pod can be removed. And this is a C-Power pack, which means that we have a whole bunch of warboards, a Storch, twin engines, a whole bunch of different planes that can fly off this bigger motor power plant. So if you're new to the swappable concept, and this is your first one, you could take this power pod and hop it between a lot of different designs. And thanks to our community designing so many great designs, we're going to have a lot more to come in the future. I actually cut one of these earlier. I don't know where I put it. There we are. Oh, speaking of which, let's talk to you about glue globs. On one end of this, just spin it very slowly. Just like that. Put a nice little glue glob around it. And let that dry. Another trick I'll show you here, why this is drying, is a way to make your holes a little bit more rubbery. That on the edge there. So these holes can get a little bit big. take your extra barbecue skewer, put a little drop of glue, very little drop of glue, and just like a drill bit, pass it all the way through, and then all the way back out, just like that. Now by passing it through and all the way back out, what you're doing, and you can see that it still has a glue dust. You don't want to have so much glue that it doesn't, that glues it together. That's going to make that real rubbery. And that rubbery texture is going to keep your barbecue skewers in a little bit longer. Go ahead and do that on both sides. You don't need to. It's all in how long you want it to last. Let's get a little drop of glue on this. Spinning the whole way through and the whole way back out. Notice I'm using a scrap piece, not the piece that we're passing through. Make sure it doesn't glue it in. Okay, that's nice and dry now. This will pass through. Now it has a nice rubbery texture that keeps it in. Guys, please keep the tips coming. These kind of tips are really helpful for us and helpful to others. So we listen to them, we take your feedback, especially with things like I want push rods, I want different components for scratch building. We really appreciate the feedback. All right, let's go ahead and put our battery on. I'm just going to stick this on temporarily, turn it on, and let's check our control throws. I have this, I'm going to tuck this side. There we are. Okay, so the prop is still off. Our controls are put in. We're going to point this away from us. We're going to want to make sure that our controls are going the right direction. So, as we move our aileron stick to the right aileron should go up. That's backwards. As we pull back on the elevator should go up. That's perfect. And as we move our rudder stick to the rudder should go right. So both our aileron and our rudder are backwards, and we want to correct that. The way we're going to do that is we're going to go here. We're going to move over to servo settings. I like this. We have a scroll pad here. We have a select and escape over here. We're going to go over servo settings. And all we need to do is tab down to aileron, which is S2, which is our service port 2, or signal port 2. Now, when we hit enter once, you'll see there's three different things. You have arrows. That's your reversing. This is your center. And this is your travel limit. It's all on one page. So you can go through one page and set everything up. I selected it by hitting enter. I hit up once. Now our ailerons are perfect. Our elevator's good, but our rudder still needs change. I'm going to hit enter one more time, deselect it, go down to channel port number 4, select it, change my signal, make the arrow point to the reverse direction, hit enter, and now our rudder's good. Also with combat planes, you don't want, this is perfect, this is right about 12 inches. In your kits, guys, you're going to have a throw angle. You're going to want to put that up against. I'm going to show you how to do that in a second. But I'm going to go ahead and go one step further while I'm working with my radio, and I'm going to dial in my dual rates right here. I got my aileron. I'm going to scroll over. I'm going to select it. I'm going to move my expo up to 30. What expo is it makes the center of the stick softer. It's very, very important. Now, I can set this to a switch. If I wanted to set it to a switch, like S3, all I do is hit this, and I'd move the switch that I want. Right there. So high rates, we have 30. Low rates, we still have 0. So I can go back here on my low rates. The reason I'm showing you this in the build video is it's very important, especially with faster models, that you set your rates up. Now I'm going to kick this down to lower rates. When I flip the switch low, it goes low. So I want to kick it down even lower. I'm going to kick down to about 65. There we go with 30% expo. So there's 100% throw, 30% throw. We're going to do the same process down one more. We're going to assign it to our switch. And guess what? We're going to put on the same switch. Boom. So now we're going to go ahead, 30% expo once again. And probably down to about 65 again on this. This is right about where the presets are on both the MZ10 and also the DX5E. There we are. So low rates, high, low, and high. And I'm going to go back with the throw gauge that's included in the kit and validate those. And all I'm going to do with the rudder is go 30%. got this one. There we are. Low rates, high rates. Low rates, high rates. Everything looks to be centered beautifully. So in your kit, you're gonna have a little throw gauge just like this, high and low. All you simply need to do is, if you're dialing in your radio, just set this up and get that so it meets it. So there's our high rates. And then when we flip our switch, there's our low rates. Now this is a suggestion, you don't have to fly this way, but if you're intermediate or just getting in the hobby, I strongly recommend that you set these throws up, especially low rates. You can always move up to high, but if you start off with high, it's ballistic. So we're all set here. Our last step is we're going to put the prop on and we're going to check our balance and we're going to go out and fly it. Prop is on. Now we're going to use the battery for our CG. And this should be pretty close to being balanced with the CG as it is. You can see it's just a little bit tail heavy when I put my fingers in these two holes right here. That means we're going to want our battery just a touch ahead. So we're going to go ahead and start here. Now if this is your first test flight, one thing I strongly recommend is get it so your CG just slightly nose down, just like that. It's easier to fly a nose heavy airplane than it is a tail heavy airplane. So our balance is checked. It's beautiful weather outside, all our controls are set. The next thing to do is go have some fun and get it for our maiden. So while Brown was getting the camera lens set up, we went ahead and put some stickers on this too, and we wanted to try out the matte black stickers. It looks amazing. But also Dan Sponholz has patterns available on his article to make this look just like a Bloody Baron, or I should say a Red Baron. And you can decal it up that way. His graphics are beautiful. Got a special thanks for Dan and Keegan. You guys are the first ones to release a community release. I can't think of a better way to kick it off than the Bloody Baron. This is all ready, it's trimmed, it's balanced. We have very little wind. We're gonna toss it in the wind. If you guys have never made in a plane before, there's a video called 6 Tips to a Successful First Flight. It'll be linked below. I'd strongly recommend you see it. It'll give you all the pointers to have a good first flight. Some of it's redundant, but it'll hopefully iron out all the wrinkles. We don't want you crashing. All right, I'm rambling enough. Let's go ahead and fly it. Here we go. We got 2200 in here in the 9.6 prop. By the way, this is on low rates. It just tracks like it's on rails. I love this thing. All right, time to go high rates. Oh yeah, and here's the cool thing, is since we have rudder,
nice.
Since we have rudder, we can actually give controls like wing overs, hammerheads, things like that. So here's a hammerhead. You could do outside snaps. Almost, you could darn near do a flat spin. Let's see if we can do a flat spin. Not that way, let's see.
Not quite.
No, it won't flat spin. All right.
Sign this off.
Let's go ahead and check out the stall real quick. Now guys, I'm sorry, I'm really banging the sticks out. All right, here's a full stall right there. That's all we got. And let's go ahead and flip it down to low rates and try inverted. With inverted, you just need to breath it down, that's all. A little bit of wind.
That was a long periscope, that was 18 minutes.
Woo! All right, let's go ahead and bring it in. There we are. Friends, if you love combat, if you like having fun with friends, if you love building as a group, this is a fantastic choice for you. And Dan and Keegan Sponholz, thank you so much for our first community release and for making such an amazing design. Now guys, if you're wondering what a community release is, it's where people from our community are designing great aircraft, great designs, and they're giving us permission to do build videos and content around it. Dan and Keegan were the very first ones to do that. Incredibly amazing people. They're helping support Flight Test through offering up their content. If you guys are interested in the same thing, make a great article on flitetest.com. That's how we find it, and as it gets traction, we contact you, and we'd love to see more and more people doing this. Our idea is to elevate the community, show what amazing minds and creative talent they have, and then showcase that to the rest of the community. All right, we'll see you next time.
Oh! I'm down! Wow! I was brutally mauled by somebody.